Well, it is a joy to be with you. I've been anticipating this message since I last spoke. It's about 3-4 weeks ago, and after that message, I thought, I've got bags of time to prepare. And as is the case, that never materialised. So I've been frantically working away this week late at night up in my room preparing this. This message has probably been prepared a dozen times and chopped and changed. There's so much. There was stuff in it that when I read through it, I thought, because it's quite a delicate topic, and I kept having to move things or delete things and try and get it to make it make sense. So I hope and pray that it will make sense and that I'll make sense of it. It's a vital topic and you don't often hear messages like this, even in the prophetic witness movement circles. I know that I spoke on this about 10 years ago. Colin Linauri, who is one of the main guys at the PWMI, said that he'd actually spoken on this, and he was encouraging me, saying that he concurs with what I was saying, which was a blessing. But other than that, I don't know of anyone else that has spoken on this subject other than Don Stanton, who was not officially connected with PWMI, but he did speak there. I was privileged to be a representative of the Ministry Maranatha Revival Crusade, which is no longer going. But Don spoke extensively. I did mention in the first session that I put up a couple of books that I'd used to sort of lay the foundation for the first session from Don. There are now, though, thankfully, a lot more people that you can get on YouTube that are speaking about this and that are openly sharing these messages. But they're few and far between, and it's kind of getting into that niche. Once you get into that niche, then you can find the people. I'll just name a couple just for reference. There's one guy called Brandon Holthouse. I've really about 18 months I got first come across Brandon, and I've really come to like Brandon in a big way. Another one that's what you might want to call one of my favourites is a guy called Andy Woods. Andy Woods spoke on 3 messages at a conference on globalism, which again is tied into all this and other stuff as well. But as I say, once you start listening to them, and because of the algorithms in YouTube, they tend to think, oh, he likes that, so we'll send him this. And so you tend to be able to pick up people and get yourselves subscribed to their channels. Well, that's all just, by the way, just to let you know. So what I did then in part 1 is I laid a platform or a foundation for what I want to share this evening. I talked about the beginnings of the conspiracy agenda that the world was what we're taken into, and I mentioned some of the early players. What I want to do this evening is try and bring it up to a little bit more up to date. So in part 1 then of the coming New World Order, I made the case that the world is in the clutches of a deep and subtle conspiracy. It is a secret plan to rule the world. Although we refer to it as the New World Order, there is absolutely nothing new about it. In fact, it is the age-long war between Satan and Yahweh El Shaddai, Almighty God. It began when Satan and 1/3 of the angels rebelled against God and were kicked out of heaven. Satan, realizing that he can't rule heaven, set his sights on earth and thought that in his corrupted mind, which is recorded in Ezekiel chapter 28, Satan thought in his corrupted mind that he wants to rule the earth and receive the one thing that he craves, and that is worship and power. This then started a war, a cosmic war that Chuck Missler refers to it as. This war has been raging for 6,000 years, and it will not stop until the Lord Jesus Christ, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, returns to take the throne as promised him, to rule the world in perfect peace, righteousness, and justice. It is critical as believers to always keep this truth in mind, particularly when we're discussing issues like this that we'll be discussing this evening. It's too easy to lose sight of the fact that we are on the winning side. The Lord Jesus Christ is King of Kings. He is Lord of Lords. He is the King of the universe. He is in fact in charge. He is in control. Nothing that Satan, the demons, and his human accomplices do or try to do is done without the triune Godhead allowing it. Yes, Jesus is the King of Kings, but more than that, he's our King. Now, with that being said, a core component of the globalist conspiracy is Satan's legions of demons. 1/3 of the angels who fell with Satan are now at his behest as demons to assist in his evil agenda of world domination. And in this slide, we have Satan, of course, he's the leader of it all. He has then at his disposal demons. And then, of course, there are human agents. And they all make up the Luciferian conspiracy. And it can be diagrammed out in this next slide. Again, we've got the Luciferian elite at the top of that. And then you come down and then you've got business and finance, quite big, all the banks, the money people, the secret societies, which I did mention a number of them, such as the Illuminati, the Freemasons, what have you. And then further down, then you have the political institutions, for example, the United Nations, or United Nonsense, as they should correctly be called. Then you have the military and intelligence people like the CIA, the FBI. And then further on, then, of course, we can't fail to recognise the religious aspect of it with the World Council of Churches and so on, and the cults and other false religions. And then you have also the policy and influence organisations like UNESCO and all those that you can see on there. There's one further down there called the Lucis Trust. Now, I've not put that in my notes, but as I was preparing this, I came across the Lucis Trust. It used to be called, I think, the Luciferian Press. It was a lady called Alice Bailey, and her husband created this trust, this trust which produces books and what have you. She was heavily demonized, this woman, and she was receiving messages from a demon, and she even records his name of who he is and fed into this, and a lot of the globalists and a lot of the leaders took messages from her. So you can see where it all ties together. So with all that being said, we then must always remember and heed the words of Paul in Ephesians 6, chapter 6, verses 12 to 13. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Wherefore, take unto you the whole armour of God, that ye may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. I've highlighted on my notes that you may be able. It doesn't say that you may be, we are able to stand. When we avail ourselves of God's promises and what God has availed to us in spiritual weapons of warfare, then we can stand. But we must always remember that the battle is not against flesh and blood. It is not people that we're fighting against. It's the spirits of the unseen world that are many ways influencing people. The ultimate goal of Satan and his co-conspirators is the establishment of a one-world political, economic and religious system. He wants total control. For centuries, the record shows that those who are in league with Satan have been discussing the creation of a global surveillance grid and tracking system that will allow them to manage the smallest details of the lives of every human being on the planet. Those in league with Satan, along with demons and human agents who are deliberately, unwillingly working against God, we can call them Luciferians. That's what they call themselves. They take that name themselves, Luciferians. They take the name of Lucifer much the same way as we believers would take the name of Christ and call ourselves Christians. Carol Quigley exposes the details of the Luciferian conspiracy in his book, Tragedy and Hope. And one of his quotes in his book from Carol Quigley says, "For the first time in its history, Western civilization is in danger of being destroyed internally by a corrupt criminal ruling cabal, which is centered around the Rockefeller interests, which include elements from the Morgan, Brown, Rothschild, DuPont, Harriman, Kuhnlub, and other groupings as well. This junta took control of the political, financial, and cultural life of America in the first 2 decades of the 20th century." He also quotes in his book, according to Quigley, he says, "Individual freedom of choice will be controlled within very narrow alternatives by the fact that everyone will be numbered from birth." He continues, "We will be followed as a number through educational training, required military or public service, tax contributions, health, medical requirements, and through to final retirement and death. This has all been the plan." And this is exactly what we see unfolding today through things like global ID card, social media, and smartphone apps. To advance their agenda, the globalists or the Luciferians control the media. Gary Allen observed, "We believe the picture painters of the mass media are artfully creating landscapes for us, which deliberately hide the real picture." David Rockefeller blatantly admitted it when he said, "We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promise of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subject to the bright lights of public publicity during these years." This is, of course, nothing new. It goes back decades, and it is perhaps why Thomas Jefferson is purported to have said, "People who don't read the newspapers know more than those that do." In other words, disinformation can be more dangerous than no information at all. In Jefferson's day, newspapers were all you had. At least now, those who take the time to look at facts and use critical thinking to study for themselves from a wealth of resources. I just mentioned a couple at the beginning. Mentioning David Rockefeller, it is interesting that when these people speak, they cannot help themselves in admitting what they are up to. Take this quote again from David Rockefeller, cited in his memoirs at page number 405. He says, "For more than a century, ideological extremists," I wonder who he means, "have seized upon well-publicised incidents to attack the Rockefeller family for the inordinate influence they claim we wield over American political and economic institutions. Some even believe we are part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists and conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure. One world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty, and I am proud of it." That's from David Rockefeller. And that, my friend, sums up what the globalists and the Luciferians are about. And one of the struggles that I had when I was putting this message together, as I was mentioned at the beginning, is the fact that things are changing so fast. If I were doing this presentation 10 years ago, it was pretty easy to get up-to-date quotes and up-to-date events. However, and I do not exaggerate, things are happening and changing so fast, and almost, if not actually, on a daily basis. In other words, as soon as you put pen to paper, you are already out of date. But I do want to try my best to bring you up to date the best that I can in telling you what's kind of happening now, as it were. Of course, I cannot give you all the things that are happening, certainly not in one session, even though there was a previous session. And I don't want to go on and on with this subject. This tonight will be it, and then we'll get on to other stuff. But it is important, I feel, to do that. But I couldn't bring you up to date with everything that is happening. I trust that at the end, if I remember to share with you how you can, if you want to go down and look at this yourself, I'll point you in the right direction. Now, the phrase New World Order has become a little dated. And so, like most other things in life, it has gone through a number of changes, or it might be better to say it has developed over time. And through many organisations, groups and private clubs, and of course secret societies. And finally, we arrive at the WEF. Just to be clear, although the faces change and the names may differ, the end game, the main plan and the rules to get there never change. So as we go, I trust that things will become clear. And so let me be bold and assume that you are familiar with the phrase, the Great Reset, which has been the slogan of the WEF. It will be helpful, I think, to take a little deeper look into the WEF, because it has a shady beginning. According to the official narrative, the WEF was launched as an offshoot of the Club of Rome, which is one of the said secret groups. The Club of Rome was founded by Aurelio Pecci, David Rockefeller and Alexander King in 1968, during a meeting at a home owned by the Rockefeller family. The purpose of the WEF was to influence the world's financial system and establish a one world government. William Cooper explained in his book, Behold a Pale Horse, that Aurelio Pecci made it clear from its inception that the Club of Rome desired to take control of the world and reduce the world to a safe level by a process of benevolent slavery and genocide. The world's elite, Pecci said, need to increase the death rate, and he suggested that a plague be introduced that would have the same effect as the Black Death of history. As is almost always the case, however, there is more to the story of the birth of the WEF than meets the eye. The WEF was not merely the result of an intersection between Klaus Schwab, David Rockefeller and the Club of Rome, which is bad enough. The CIA and Henry Kissinger also played a role in the launch of the WEF. J.B. Hickson, in his book Spirit of the Antichrist, Volume 2, has this quote. In fact, most of my presentation this evening is based on a lot of J.B. Hickson's work, a set of 3 books that he did, and I'll be quoting from one shortly. But back to the quote. Johnny Vedmir explains, it was actually born out of a CIA-funded Harvard program headed by Henry Kissinger and pushed to fruition by John Kenneth Galbraith and the real Dr. Strangelove, Herman Kahn. This is the amazing story behind the real men who recruited Klaus Schwab, who helped him create the World Economic Forum, and who taught him to stop worrying and love the bomb. And JB continues, the evidence points to Klaus Schwab having been recruited by Kissinger into his circle of round-table imperialists via a CIA-funded program at Harvard University. In addition, the year he graduated would also be the year in which it was revealed to have been a CIA-funded program. The CIA-funded seminar would introduce Schwab to the extremely well-connected American policymakers, and it would help him create what would become the most powerful European public policy institute, the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum's recorded history has been manufactured to appear as though the organisation was a strictly European creation, but it's not so. In fact, Klaus Schwab and an elite American political team had an American political team working in the shadows that aided him in creating the European-based globalist organisation. Schwab attended Harvard in the 1960s, where he would meet then Professor Henry Hay Kissinger, a man with whom Schwab would form a lifelong friendship. Kissinger recruited Schwab at an international seminar at Harvard, which had been funded by the Central Intelligence Agency. The upper echelon of the Luciferian oligarchy is comprised of the same old suspects, and their paths overlap in a variety of sectors. One of the shocking, and without wanting to be too dramatic about it, one of the shocking things to realise that I came across and realised is that at the core piece or the core policy of and agenda of the Luciferian conspiracy is the depopulation agenda. And I want to briefly touch on that. But before we do, I think it's important that we have John 10:10 in mind. Jesus speaking here, and he says, the thief, in a reference to Satan, the thief cometh not but for to steal, and to kill, and to destroy. I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. Keep that verse in mind as we go through this depopulation agenda. The Club of Rome published its infamous book called The Limits to Growth in 1972, shortly after helping to establish the WEF. In the book, they advocated for depopulation. One of the stated goals of the book was to warn of the likely outcome of contemporary economic and industrial policies with a view to influencing changes to a sustainable lifestyle. The Club of Rome website still touts the book and highlights the book's message. Man can create a society in which he can live indefinitely on Earth if he imposes limits on himself and his production of material goods to achieve a state of global equilibrium, with population and production in carefully selected balance. Note that population must be in balance with production. In other words, we need to reduce the world's population. Continue with the population control, and Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, was the husband of Queen Elizabeth II. He died in 2021 at the age of 99. His Lucerian bloodlines run very, very deep. He hailed from the British Mountbatten dynasty and was a direct descendant of Queen Victoria and was related to most of the royal houses of Europe. Throughout his life, he was part of the global elite, attending secret meetings with high-level Kabbalists and representing their views in public. In a 1981 interview with People magazine, Prince Philip echoed the views of the Satan one-worlders when he told Fred Hauptführer, human population is probably the single most serious long-term threat to survival. We're in for a major disaster if it is not curbed. For the natural world, not just for the natural world, but for the human world. The more people there are, the more resources they'll consume, the more pollution they'll create, the more fighting they'll do. We have no option. If it isn't controlled voluntarily, it will be controlled involuntarily by an increase in disease, starvation, and war. Continuing in 1988, reported in the Telegraph, Prince Philip told a German news agency, Deutsche Presse Agentur, in the event that I am reincarnated, I would like to return as a deadly virus to contribute something to solving overpopulation. See, these people are sick. In his book, Population Control, the late James Mars explained that depopulation has been a top priority of the globalists for decades. Mars stated brutal policies of depopulation have been incorporated into national policy in some countries, including the United States. He added, in 1974, the US National Security Council issued a classified study entitled National Security Study Memorandum, NSSM 200. Implications of a worldwide population growth for US security and overseas interests. Known as the Kissinger Report, the study stated that population growth in the so-called lesser developed countries represented a serious threat to the US national security. The study was adopted as official government policy in 1975 by President General Ford, and its implementation assigned to Brent Scowcroft, who had replaced Kissinger as National Security Advisor. NSSM 200 outlined a covert plan to reduce population growth in LDCs, lesser developed countries, in other words, through birth control and what many have interpreted as war and famine. Then CIA Director George H.W. Bush was ordered to assist Scowcroft, as were the Secretaries of State, Treasury and Agriculture. Mars connects the dots on the tangled web of Luciferians who are all after the same thing, total world domination. To do this, they must reduce the world's population. And when you control the weather, I want you to hang on to that. When you control the weather, you can make the entire nation starve or drown or burn. Henry Kissinger said, depopulation should be the highest priority of foreign policy towards the third world, because the US economy will require large and increasing amounts of minerals from abroad, especially from less developed countries. In other words, the natural resources of the third world countries are far more valuable to the Luciferians than the people themselves. Remember what we read in John, the thief comes not but for to steal, to kill and to destroy. Now, some of you may be feeling a little uncomfortable right now, but please stay with me. Remember what I said earlier about Jesus being the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, and that's why I mentioned it right up front. Now, just by way of documentation, just so that you don't think I'm making this stuff up, I want you to watch this video clip, and I want you to notice the backdrop. In other words, who's funding it and who's behind it.
I think that it's really fulfilling of a dream that we had together with my leadership team when we started in 19. The first week we met in January of 19 in California and set up the goals for the next 5 years. And one of them was by 2023, we will reduce the number of people in the world by 50%. I think today this dream is becoming reality.
So it's really a purpose-driven company. And
that was just a short clip. Why the crowd is clapping, I've got no idea. But did you catch what he said? The dream is becoming, the dream of killing half of the world population, the dream is becoming reality. I mentioned weather control just before this video clip. Just before I go there, when he talks about killing half the world's population, it's interesting that the book of Revelation, in the seal judgments and the bowl judgments, once they're finished, half of the world's population is destroyed. In the seal judgments, a quarter of the world is destroyed. And then in the bowl judgments, a third of what is left is destroyed, which adds up to half of the world's population. Just thought that's interesting, to say the least. And these guys are wanting to do that. So, as I say, I mentioned the weather just before the video clip. So we turn now to another issue in progress, and it is called geoengineering. And I echo the words of J.B. Hixon again in his book, The Spirit of the Antichrist, Volume 1. And I quote, "You may find it hard to accept what is presented." And so I echo those words. The truth is, I do not want you to accept what I say. I want you to check out everything that I say. Do your own research on things. The Bible is clear. Prove all things. Hold fast that which is good, in 1 Thessalonians 5:21. To fully understand the idea of geoengineering, we must understand the relationship between the global warming hysteria and the global warming movement, now officially called climate change. The climate is changing, no doubt about that. But the question is, why, how, and by whom, and to what end? It is seldom about what it is about. In these great last days of deception, hidden agendas, secret plans, iniquitous objectives are the order of the day. I first heard about what's known as chemtrails, it must be over 10 years ago now, if not more. I knew very little about it, and I'd seen and heard evidence about it from trusted sources. However, until recently, it was never really something that I cared much about. Now, I have become very concerned about it. I also remember about the time when it was first new to me, at least, that if you mentioned it, you were immediately confined to the tinfoil hat nut brigade, conspiracy theorist. But I want to read now from J.B. Hickson's book, The Spirit of the Antichrist, Volume 1, page 8, chapter 114. I could have typed it out, but I just thought it'd be interesting just to read it to you. It says, in 2009, global warming was exposed as the hoax that it is. Emails from a global research centre in the United Kingdom revealed scientists deleting and altering data to hide the truth that global temperatures have actually been cooling. The scientists at the University of East Anglia's Climate Research Unit were caught manipulating data to support their cause. Additional internal memos exposed the whole global warming crisis as a scam from the start. There never was a problem. It was a manufactured crisis to achieve a particular end, namely the imposition of taxes of bankrupt citizens and bring more money to the elite. Yet amazingly, despite being exposed as a fraud, the global warming hoax lives on, unaided and abetted by the mainstream media. It is as if the scandal never happened. I am amazed, this is JB Hickson speaking, I am amazed at the number of people I come across in my travels who are completely unaware of the now infamous Copenhagen documents that exposed the global warming hoax. Once again, Satan's deception has gotten easier and easier. The average person does not have the desire to search for the truth. It is much easier to accept the propaganda and lies that are being spoon-fed to the public. And then at the end of the page, I thought this was quite telling. Today there are climate summits all over the world hosted by top scientists. It's all part of a multifaceted effort by Satan's co-conspirators to destroy and control. In everything he does, Satan comes to steal, kill and destroy. Quoting from John 10:10. The ultimate aim of global warming and geoengineering techniques is to take over control of the planet. Remember, Satan wants this planet for his playground. Quite a telling quote. I'm sure you'll agree. Now this next slide is, it's on my computer because I'm connected to the internet. We're not here. It's a video. It's from YouTube, and that's just a screenshot of it, and it's from the Met Office. They're now admitting what we've been saying all along, that they're spraying things into the air. It's about, I think this one's about 5 minutes long or something like that, but it's worth finding. So they're now admitting what's been blatantly obvious for everyone, for most people, as it seems. So they admitted there that that's what they're doing, that they're spraying the atmosphere in some kind of weird nonsense idea of cooling the earth, and so there's bits of different metals coming down, and so what's happening is it's going into the air, spreads out and goes really fine, so probably naked to the naked eye you can't see it. It goes into the ground and we consume it through the foods that we eat, and there's the water as well that we drink, and there's things going on with that as well. Now, just sort of as I was a few weeks ago, sorry, go back. This is from my phone. These are screenshots off of my personal phone. That we was going to work one morning, and this is just going out of Oakworth on the way to work, and I looked up at the sky. It was a beautiful day, the sun just like today, blue sky, beautiful. Then I looked across and I saw all these, I think the chemtrails. And I said to Brenda, I said, take a photograph of that, document that. Now, I don't know what it is they're spraying into the atmosphere, but I don't like it, and it shouldn't be happening. Now, I don't know if little old me can do out about it, but I've been thinking, is there anything we can do about it? Probably not, but it's happening. So that's the weather and geoengineering. I want to go on to one other thing now called CBDCs. Now, you might not know what that is. That is central bank digital currencies. Now, the introduction of CBDCs has been around for a while, and I think it was through my limited knowledge and very brief spell of dealing with cryptocurrencies that I first heard or was introduced to the term digital currencies. Never heard about it before. And then, so I was surprised then when I read, in anticipation of the shift toward digital currency, President Biden nominated Saul Omarava to be the controller of the currency a powerful role within the US Treasury Department and will make her responsible for the regulation of America's largest banks. She eventually withdrew her nomination on December the 7th, 2021, during her Senate confirmation hearing, yet her nomination telegraphed loudly and clearly where this is heading. Saul Omorava is an unabashed Marxist whose academic resume reads like a who's who of Luciferian socialists. Plucked from obscurity in the West Kazakhstan region of Kazakh Soviet Socialist Republic, Omorava attended Moscow State University in 1989 on the Vladimir Lenin Academic Scholarship. Her thesis from Moscow State University is titled Karl Marx's Economic Analysis and the Theory of Revolution in the Capital. She went on to receive a PhD in Political Science from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and a Juris Doctor from Northwest University Pritzker School of Law, two institutions widely recognized for their socialist leanings. In an October 2020 paper entitled The People's Ledger, How to Democratize Money and Finance the Economy, Omorava suggested that the Federal Reserve should have the power to withdraw funds from individuals' accounts. In July 2023, so this is less than a year ago, the Federal Reserve launched a new initiative called Fed Now. As Jordan Finisef explains in an article for Keto.com, Fed Now was developed in an effort to create a platform capable of providing instant payment services to financial institutions nationwide, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Participation by financial institutions enables businesses and individuals to send and receive instant payments at any time of the day, giving recipients full access to funds immediately, allowing for greater flexibility in money management. That's the good side of it. You always have a carrot, as it were. Currently, transactions between banks take 1 to 3 business days to process, depending on the type of transaction, a wire or credit card, for example. And banking institutions are limited in the amount of transactions that they can process in a single day. Once they reach that limit, the electronic transfer requests that come in are pushed to the next day. With Fed Now, all transactions will be instant. The instantaneous nature of Fed Now will allow the technocrats to have real-time control over their slaves, under who they mean. Instead of sending out enforcement thugs to say, we noticed you tried to purchase such and such yesterday, or we see you are spending a lot of money on products and services that use carbon, they will be able to deal with you on the spot, right there and then. They can turn your access to money on or off immediately at their discretion. Catherine Austin Fitz explains, and I quote, I would describe this as a slavery system. So we're talking about shifting out of freedom, where we have freedom to roam and freedom to say what we want, into a complete control system, and further centralise economic and political control. End quote. Tom Mutton, the CBDC director at the Bank of England, openly admits that CBDCs and other digital transactions technology could be used to control an individual's choices and behaviours. According to Mutton, you could introduce programmability. There could be some socially beneficial outcomes from that, preventing activity which is seen to be socially harmful in some way. Who gets to decide? That's the question. In keeping with Satan's goal of complete control over the world, digital currency will allow the Luciferians to determine what, if anything, you can purchase, and when, if ever, you can do so. If Big Brother sees that you have made unflattering comments about the government on social media, the cost of your food purchases might double until you publicly recant. So far then, we've just touched on 1 or 2 things that are happening right now as we speak. This CBDC thing is very real and it is happening. I have now almost gone out of my way to keep cash alive. I keep telling people, and if it's in my power to do so, I use cash everywhere I go. Myself and Brendan now, we use cash where we go, everywhere we go. And if we go somewhere and they won't take cash, we'll walk out. Say, right, and get it somewhere else where they do take cash. Cash is still needed, but once they bring in this CBD, it's total control over who you are and what you are. Now, I could talk a lot more about that, but I want to go on now and to bring in the biblical aspect of what's happening, because we've gone on. And so I want to read from Revelation. It's up on the screen there. Show you where all this is leading. Revelation chapter 13. I'm just going to read from verse 14 there. And it reads as follows. And deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast which had the wound by a sword and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that hath the mark or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Now this text and these verses have been a topic of debate among prophecy teachers for years. Debate and discussions, trying to work out what is all this about. Now, as time has gone on, things have become a little bit clearer. Fogs seems to be lifting. And what we have here is what can be described as a technological statement. Whenever did you have a system or anything in place that you could control the entire world so that people wouldn't be able to buy or sell unless they had a mark of some kind? Well, through the advent of internet and computers, we now see how that can be possible. Now, I want to kind of say to friends and to you that do not worry about the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast will not come into force until halfway through the Great Tribulation, after the rapture of the church. Now, just to sort of give you a panorama of prophecy, here is the church age. This is where we're living now. At the rapture, shortly after, the tribulation will begin. And it's a 7-year program. And this is the midpoint. So there's 3.5 years run up to that. And there's all kinds of stuff going on, people getting killed through pestilence, famine, and what have you, and war. So at some point during this midpoint is when the Antichrist reaches his zenith of power, goes into the temple in Jerusalem, declares that he is God, and that's when he then will enforce this mark of the beast. So what we're dealing with, what I've been sharing, is it's a bit like a chess game. In order to play a game of chess, you need to have all the pieces in place, set on the board. What we're seeing now is a setting up for the beast system that will come to fruition fully in the tribulation period. Now, what's becoming clearer and clearer to us is that we don't know how far this will go before the rapture of the church. We may even see the system completely in place before Antichrist arrives. It certainly has to be in place for him in the middle. So, and things don't just happen in a vacuum. They don't happen overnight. Usually things like this happen gradually. And so that's what we're seeing developing and happening in the prophetic realm. Each time something happens, it's relevant to prophecy. And even within the global arena, we see things, countries lining up that are all purporting to show you how things are in the end times. Russia, aligned with Iran, which is Persia in the Bible. We see NATO, the Western Alliance, of the Roman Empire. And I was going to talk about the things that, but that's for another time, about the empires of Babylon. How Babylon is destined to reappear, but not as we might think, and that'll be in a future talk. Now, so what have I tried to explain today? Have I tried to explain that things are happening sometimes under our noses, or if you like, above our heads, that we need to be aware of, so that we can help others. As I said right at the beginning, we're on the winning side. Jesus has already won the battle, and we're on enemy territory at this moment in time. And as that part of being on that enemy territory, we're out there to win as many people as we can for God's kingdom. We all have, I'm sure I have, and you may have family members that don't know Jesus yet. And we need to, by the way that we live, the way that we speak, and the way that we talk and act, we need to try and show them that they need to get saved. Now, I don't know if they'll get saved before the rapture. They may get saved after. It's important that they do get saved. But it is my sincere prayer always for my family members to get to know Jesus. I mean, I was speaking to my dad about chemtrails just the other day. In fact, no, I was speaking about Revelation, what I mentioned earlier. It was after work, we were sat down, and I say, no, because he always says how good he is at maths. I say, oh, Dad, I want you to work something out for me. He says, oh, yeah, go on then. I says, I want you to work out. So the world's population is about 8 billion now, let's for sake of argument. He says, yeah. I says, that. So what would be left if you killed a quarter of that 8 billion? And he came back with a number. I said, oh, right, that's interesting. I says, he said 6 billion. I said, oh, right. I says, what would happen then if you took another third of that away? And he said, well, you'd be left with 4 billion. And I says, yeah, and just left it at that. And he says, what? Why did you want to know that? I says, oh, I'm just reading in the Bible about what it says for the last days. Because I've given my dad the gospel every which way I can. There's no more talking. Words will not do anything else. It needs to now, the Holy Spirit needs to work. And family are the hardest people to win. Usually, the ones I heard somebody say, and it was probably the best advice, is if you can't win your family to Christ, pray for somebody across their paths to do it. Because it would be easier for them to receive a message from somebody else than from somebody as close as a family member, particularly as a son of that. So I do hope that I've explained things. As I say, there could have been a lot more, but I had to kind of draw the line somewhere, and I've drawn it there. So what I want to do now